Learning a second language is definitely a complex process that requires going through different phases and adjustments. However, speaking a fully learned second language can be just as challenging. If you are a L2 English speaker, you have probably heard someone say the phrase, "you have an accent." Or if you have ever spoken to a native speaker, they probably guessed that English was not your first language. But why does this happen? Accentedness refers to the extent to which a listener judges L2 speech that differs from the native speaker norm. Accentedness, or a foreign accent, basically is the extent to which an individual's L2 speech differs from a particular variety of English, and it is perceived to distinguish speakers from native-like communities. But does an accent affect the way we communicate in our daily life? For English language learners, an accent is more than language enunciation and perception. It also has social parameters with consequences. A native like American English or British English pronunciation could mean employment or promotion. Often, call centers, for example, hire people with or train them to speak with native speaker accents because English speaking customers may feel more comfortable understanding the call center agents. In many positions for English language teacher, native speakers are often preferred. When looking for advertisements for English language schools and universities, academic institutions often promote themselves by stressing the number of native speakers of English they have. Moreover, English language speakers with accents perceived as non-native have been judged to be less honest than those accents perceived as native speakers of English. Thus, many English language learners believe that having a native speaker accent is advantageous. However, even though many learners strive for an American English accent, many L2 English speakers may prefer the non-native accents rather than American or British native speaker accents because their L2 accents reflect national identity or because of social group peer pressure. Many language institutions overstress the teaching of native-like accents. It is stated that English L1 listeners can learn to adapt to English L2 speakers' accents, and accents do not always make communication difficult. Non-target language accents are unavoidable for many L2 speakers. Research shows that a few adult language learners who start learning the target language will acquire native-like accents. For these reasons, the goal to have students acquire native-sounded, non-accented speech may be unnecessary. Students' focus should be on improving intelligibility and comprehensibility because communication is more important than native-like speech.
Comprehensibility. Comprehensibility is the focus on meaning. Darwin and Monroe defined comprehensibility as the perception of ease or difficulty a listener has in understanding a speaker. It is the listener's ability to understand the speaker's complete message, not every word. Comprehensibility includes grammar, phonology, fluency, and cultural, sociolinguistic, and pragmatic aspects. Why should intelligibility and comprehensibility be the focus rather than L2 accent reduction? By making intelligibility and comprehensibility goals for language learners, their L2 proficiency can improve. With motivation and effort, L2 speakers of English can improve communicating in English. Teachers can try to promote successful comprehensible communication by having students practice both segmentals, which are consonants and vowels features, and suprasegmentals, which are word stress, rhythm, thought groups and pausing, connected speech, and intonation. Teachers should integrate pronunciation practice with communicative activities. Dickinson adds that segmental and suprasegmental systems should be taught together because the clarity of segmentals is related to the message. Darwin also reports that ESL learners who were taught prosody were able to improve their comprehensibility more than learners who received instruction targeting individual sounds. Teachers should also use recasting as a corrective technique by modeling or giving the correct form to create explicit awareness in L2 learners. For example, a student may say, I spoke to him yesterday, and the teacher would say, oh, you spoke to him yesterday. Otherwise, with fossilization, 251 English pronunciation, intelligibility, comprehensibility, and accentedness, no improvement may occur. Darwin and Monroe explained that explicit corrective feedback is valuable. Explicit correction also leads to defossilizing speech patterns which interfere with communication. Teachers should not try to eradicate accents, and accents should be accepted unless they obstruct communication. Research by Monroe and Darwin show that L2 accent markedness does not reduce a listener's comprehension of speech. Teachers should strive to make students' speech functional, not native-like. Language is used by participants to accomplish social processes in communication. In short, teachers should strive for intelligibility and comprehensibility without placing too much emphasis on making L2 learners sound like native speakers of English, so that they may communicate with people from different parts of the world more successfully.
There is growing research on the linguistic features that most contribute to making second language speech easy or difficult to understand. Comprehensibility, which is usually captured through listener judgment, is increasingly viewed as integral to the second language speaking construct. However, there are shortcomings in how this construct is operationalized in second language speaking proficiency scales. Moreover, teachers and learners have little practical means of benefiting from research pinpointing that properties of learners' oral performance that optimize or hinder their ability to be understood. There is thus the need for a tool to guide teachers on what to focus on in instruction in order to target more effectively the linguistic factors that matter most for being understood and to raise learners' awareness about their abilities.
Hello, my name is Andrea, and I'm going to talk about the intelligibility in English as a second language. Intelligibility is a focus on words and refers to listener comprehension of a sentence. Also, intelligibility includes pronunciation, stress, intonation, and vowel and consonant sounds. Darwin and Monroe define this as the extent to which a listener understands a speaker's message. Intelligibility it is a two-way process because it involves both speakers' language pronunciation and listeners' comprehension ability. A listener's previous exposure to the second language speech or familiarity with the topic of discussion can affect the understanding of L2 speakers. For example, many professionals who teach English in Japan can usually understand a student's English despite the Japanese language accent. Another example is that scientists who speak English as a first language or as a second language may be more willing to attempt to understand what other second language English speakers have to say because of a shared interest in the field knowledge. Why should intelligibility and comprehensibility be the focus rather than language to accent reduction? By making intelligibility and comprehensibility goals for language learners, Their second language proficiency can improve. With motivation and effort, second language speakers of English can improve communication in English. Language is used by participants to accomplish social processes in communication. This means that teachers should strive for intelligibility and comprehensibility without placing too much emphasis on making second language learners sound like native speakers of English, so that they may communicate with people from different parts of the world more successfully. The accent has a big role in intelligibility as well. According to the Oxford Dictionary, accent is defined as a way of pronouncing the words of a language that show which country, area, or social class a person comes from. Munro discussed a study in which English speakers show a higher degree of intelligibility when they listen to English speakers with a Spanish accent. Current studies emphasize the importance of intelligibility among English speakers, no matter if they're native speakers or not native speakers, as opposed to those for whom accent was and is the central point. Besides, it has been proved that an accented speech does not reduce intelligibility. There's a concept of intelligibility that needs to be considered, which is the intelligible principle, which is the current and dominant viewpoint. The main objective is to be understandable in order to communicate successfully, because being accented does not mean unintelligible. There's another principle that we should consider, which is the nativeness principle, that is based on the idea that learners need to reach a native-like pronunciation. Many people would like to speak like a native-like pronunciation, but in some cases, trying to adopt a native speech pronunciation diminishes the intelligibility. Diminishes the intelligibility. There are several studies that corroborate that the intelligibility principle is more important than the nativist one. But many people are still taking that the nativeness principle as their model.